Hello, third graders. We're back with On the Banks of Plum Creek. So we are up to chapter 11, which is called Runaway. All that long, quiet afternoon, they stayed in the dugout. The cattle did not come back to the haystacks. Slowly the sun went down the western sky. Soon it would be time to meet the cattle at the big gray rock, and Laura and Mary wished that Pa and Ma would come home. Again and again they went up the path to look for the wagon. At last they sat waiting with Jack on the grassy top of their house. The lower the sun went, the more attentive Jack's ears were. Often he and Laura stood up to look at the edge of the sky where the wagon had gone, though they could see it just as well when they were sitting down. Finally, Jack turned one ear that way, then the other. Then he looked up at Laura, and a waggle went across from his neck down to his stubby tail. The wagon was coming. They all stood and watched till it came out on the prairie. When Laura saw the oxen and Ma and Carrie on the wagon seat, she jumped up and down, swinging her sunbonnet and shouting, "They're coming, they're coming, they're coming." "They're coming awful fast," Mary said. Laura was still. She heard the wagon rattling loudly. Pete and Bright were coming very fast. They were running, and they were running away. The wagon came bumpity, banging, and bouncing. Laura saw Ma down in a corner of the wagon box, hanging onto it and hugging Carrie. Pa came bounding in long jumps beside Bright, shouting and hitting at Bright with the gowd. It was time to turn Bright back from the creek bank, but Pa could not do it. The big oxen galloped nearer and nearer to the steep edge. Bright was pushing Pa off. They were all going to go over. The wagon, Ma, and Carrie, they were going to fall down the bank, all the way down to the creek. Pa shouted a terrible shout. He struck Bright's head with all his might, and Bright swerved. Laura ran screaming. Jack jumped at Bright's nose. Then the wagon, Ma, and Carrie flashed by. And here they go, zooming by them. It must have been terrifying. Look at Ma in the back. She's just holding on and the baby's with her. Wow. Okay. Then the wagon, Ma, and Carrie flashed by. Bright crashed against the stable, and suddenly everything was still. Pa ran after the wagon, and Laura ran behind it. "Whoa, Bright! Whoa, Pete!" Pa said. He held onto the wagon box and looked at Ma. "We're all right, Charles," said Ma. Her face was gray, and she was shaking all over. Pete was trying to go on through the doorway into the stable, but he was still yoked to Bright, and Bright was headed against the stable wall. Pa lifted Ma and Carrie out of the wagon, and Ma said, "Don't cry now, Carrie. We're all right." Carrie's pink dress was torn down the front. She was snuffled against Mama's neck, and she tried to stop crying as Ma told her. "Oh, Caroline, I thought you were going over the bank," said Pa. "I thought so too for a minute," Ma answered, "but I might have known you wouldn't let that happen." "Psh," said Pa. "It was good old Pete. He wasn't running away. Bright was, but Pete was only going along. He saw the stable and wanted his supper." But Laura knew that Ma and Carrie would have fallen down into the creek with the wagon and the oxen if Pa had not run so fast and hit Bright so hard. She crowded against Ma's hoop skirt and hugged her tight and said, "Oh, Ma, oh, Ma, oh, Ma." So did Mary. "There, there," said Ma. "All's well that ends well. Now, girls, help bring in the packages while Pa puts in the oxen." They carried all the little packages into the dugout. They met the cattle at the gray rock and put Spot into the stable, and Laura helped milk her while Mary helped Ma get supper. At supper, they told how the cattle had gotten into the haystacks and how they had driven them away. Pa said they had done exactly the right thing. He said, "We knew we could depend on you to take care of everything. Didn't we, Caroline?" They had completely forgotten that Pa always brought them presents from town until after supper. He pushed back his bench and looked as if he expected something. Then Laura jumped on his knee, and Mary sat on the other, and Laura bounced and said, "What did you bring us, Pa? What? Guess," said Pa. They could not guess. But Laura felt something crackle in his jumper pocket, and she pounced on it. She pulled out a paper bag, beautifully striped with tiny red and green stripes. And in the bag were 2 sticks of candy, one for Mary and one for Laura. They were maple sugar colored, and they were flat on one side. Mary licked hers, but Laura bit her stick, and when the outside of it came off crumbly then. The inside was hard and clear and dark brown, and it had a rich brown tangy taste. Pa said it was hard candy. After the dishes were done, Laura and Mary each took their stick of candy and sat on Pa's knee outside the door in the cool dusk. Ma sat inside the dugout, humming to Carrie in her arms. The creek was talking to itself under the yellow willows. One by one, the great stars slung low and seemed to quiver and flicker in the little wind. Laura was snug in Pa's arm. His beard softly tickled her cheek, and the delicious candy taste melted on her tongue. After a while, she said, "Pa?" "What little half-pint?" Pa asked, against her hair. "I think I like wolves better than cattle," she said. "Well, cattle are more useful, Laura," Pa said. She thought about that for a while. Then she said, "Anyway, I like wolves better." She was not contradicting. She was only saying what she thought. "Well, Laura, we're going to have a good team of horses before long now," Pa said. And she knew when that would be. It would be when they had the wheat crop. Ooh, that was scary. First of all, imagine being left alone in that dugout all day long, those 2 girls, and all the things they were responsible for. And they were so young. They must have been so relieved when their parents came back. Okay, so chapter 12 is called The Christmas Horses. Grasshopper weather was strange weather. Even at Thanksgiving, there was no snow. The door of the dugout was wide open while they ate Thanksgiving dinner. Laura could see across the bare willow tops far over the prairie to the place where the sun would go down. There was not one speck of snow. The prairie was like soft yellow fur. The lines where it met the sky were not sharp now. They were smudged and blurry. Grasshopper weather, Laura thought to herself. She thought of grasshoppers' long folded wings and their high jointed hind legs. Their feet were thin and scratchy. Their heads were hard with large eyes on the corners, and their jaws were tiny and nibbling. If you caught a grasshopper and held it and gently poked a green blade of grass into his jaws, it would nibble it fast. They swiftly nibbled in the whole blade of grass till the tip of it went in, and then it was gone. Thanksgiving dinner was good. Pa had shot a wild goose. Ma had to stew the goose because there was no fireplace and no oven in the little stove. But she made dumplings in the gravy. And there were corn dodgers and mashed potatoes. There were butter and milk and stewed dried plums. And 3 grains of parched corn lay beside each tin plate. At the first Thanksgiving dinner, the poor pilgrims had nothing to eat but 3 parched grains of corn. Then the Indians came along and brought them turkeys, so the pilgrims were thankful. Now, after they had eaten their good, big Thanksgiving dinner, Laura and Mary could eat their grains of corn and remember the pilgrims. Parched corn was good. It crackled and it crunched, and it tasted sweet and brown. Then Thanksgiving was past, and it was time to think of Christmas. Still, there was no snow and no rain. The sky was gray, the prairie was dull, and the winds were cold. But the cold winds blew over the top of the dugout. "A dugout is snug and cozy," Ma said, "but I do feel like an animal penned up for the winter." "Never mind, Caroline," said Pa. "We'll have a good house next year." His eyes shone and his voice was singing. "And good horses and a buggy to boot. I'll take you riding, dressed up in silks. Think, Caroline, this level, rich land, not a stone or a stump to contend with, and only 3 miles from a railroad. We can sell every grain of wheat we raise." Then he ran his fingers through his hair and said, "I do wish we had a team of horses." "Now, Charles," said Ma, "here we are. all healthy and safe and snug, with plenty of food for the winter. Let us be thankful for what we have. I am, Pa said, but Pete and Bright are too slow for harrowing and harvesting. I've broken up that big field with them, but I can't pull it all in the wheat, that is, without horses. Then Laura had a chance to speak without interrupting. She said, there isn't any fireplace. Whatever are you talking about? Ma asked her. Santa Claus, Laura answered. Eat your supper, Laura, and let's not cross bridges until we come to them, said Ma. Laura and Mary knew that Santa Claus could not come down a chimney when there was no chimney to come down. One day, Mary asked Ma how Santa Claus could come. Ma did not answer. Instead, she asked, what do you girls want for Christmas? She was ironing. One end of the ironing board was on the table, and the other end was on the bedstead. Pa had made the bedstead that high on purpose. Carrie was playing on the bed, and Laura and Mary sat at the table. Mary was sorting quilt blocks, and Laura was making a little apron for her rag doll, Charlotte. The wind howled overhead, and it whined in the stove top, but there was no snow yet. Laura said, I want candy. So do I, said Mary, and Carrie said, candy. And a new winter dress, and a coat, and a hood, said Mary. So do I, said Laura, and a dress for Charlotte and... Ma lifted the iron from the stove and held it to them. They could test the iron. They licked their fingers and touched them, quicker than quick, to the smooth, hot bottom. If it crackled, the iron was hot enough. Thank you, Ma said, and she began carefully ironing around and over the patches of Pa's shirt. Do you know what Pa wants for Christmas? They did not know. Horses, said Ma. Would you girls like horses for Christmas? Laura and Mary looked at each other. I only thought, Ma went on, if we all wished for horses and nothing but horses, then maybe... Laura felt queer. That means strange. Horses were every day. They were not Christmas. If Pa got horses, he would trade for them. Laura could not think of Santa Claus and horses at the same time. Ma, she cried, there is a Santa Claus, isn't there? Of course there's a Santa Claus, said Ma. She set the iron on the stove to heat it again. The older you are, the more you know about Santa Claus, she said. You're so big now, you know he can't just be one man, don't you? You know he's everywhere on Christmas Eve. He's in the big woods, and he's in Indian territory, and he's far away in New York State, and here. He comes down all the chimneys at the same time. You know that, girls, don't you? Yes, Ma, said Laura and Mary. Well, said Ma, then you see. I guess he is like angels, Mary said slowly, and Laura could see that just as well as Mary could see that. Then Ma told them something else about Santa Claus. He was everywhere, and besides that, he was all the time. Whenever anyone was unselfish, that was Santa Claus. Christmas Eve was the time when everybody was unselfish, and on that one night, Santa Claus was everywhere because everybody all together stopped being selfish and wanted other people to be happy. And in the morning, you saw what that had done. If everybody wanted everybody else to be happy all the time, then would it be Christmas all the time? Laura asked, and Ma said, yes, Laura. Laura thought about that. So did Mary. They thought and they thought and they looked at each other. And then they knew what Ma wanted them to do. She wanted them to wish for nothing but horses for Pa. They looked at each other again, and they looked away quickly, and they did not say anything. Even Mary, who was always so good, did not say a word. That night after supper, Pa drew Laura and Mary close to him in the crook of his arms. Laura looked up at his face, and then she snuggled against him, and she said, Pa? What is it, little half pint of sweet cider? Pa asked, and Laura said, Pa, I want Santa Claus to bring... What? Pa asked. Horses, said Laura. If you would let me ride them sometimes. So do I, said Mary, but Laura had said it first. Pa was surprised. His eyes shone soft and bright. Would you girls really like horses? He asked them. Oh, yes, Pa, they said. In that case, said Pa, smiling, I have an idea that Santa Claus will bring us all a fine team of horses. That settled it. They would not have any Christmas, only horses. Laura and Mary somberly undressed and somberly buttoned up their nightgowns and somberly tied their nightcap strings. They knelt down together and said their prayer. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. And please bless Pa and Ma and Carrie and everybody and make me a good girl forever and ever. Amen. Quickly, Laura added in her own head, and please make me only glad about the Christmas horses, for never and ever again. Amen. She climbed into bed, and almost right away she was glad. She thought of horses sleek and shiny. She thought of their manes and their tails as they blew in the wind, how they picked up their swift feet, and how they sniffed the air with velvety noses, and how they looked at everything with such bright, soft eyes. And Pa said he would let them ride. Pa had tuned his fiddle now, and he set it against his shoulder. Overhead, the wind went wailing lonely in the cold dark, but in the dugout, everything was snug and cozy. Bits of firelight came through the seams of stove and twinkled on Ma's steel knitting needles and tried to catch Pa's elbow. In the shadows, the bow was dancing on the floor, and on the floor, Pa's toe was tapping, and the merry music hid the lonely crying of the wind outside. And the next chapter, as you might guess, is about Christmas. So we'll hear that one next. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you're doing well. I miss you guys. Post your comments. I love reading what you say. Okay, bye everyone.